Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN-Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's the final week before the major celebrations begin for Christmas across Trinidad and Tobago, and we're all looking forward to that. Now, as I said last week, it's the same story this weekend. The streets are rather empty and the shops, they seem not as busy as usual, let alone just for supermarkets and wholesale outlets. It's really where you're accustomed to seeing such crowds. You're not necessarily experiencing that this time. I don't know if things will pick up this week. It's anticipated that it will, but whatever the case may be, I just hope everyone this year has a Merry Christmas. Whatever a Merry Christmas is, I really hope that comes true. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as we start this edition of AM Prime, we're speaking about bio-waste and converting bio-waste into useful byproducts. And that stems from sustainable agriculture and climate change. Now, the thing is, bear in mind, Trinidad and Tobago, as a small island developing state, is susceptible and is already experiencing the effects of climate change. So how can we reduce our carbon footprint? Well, there are two individuals who are joining me this morning who can answer that question, and individuals who are putting it into practice. First, alongside me in studio this morning is the founder and managing director of Cube Root Farms Limited, Mr. Hamlyn Holder. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. One of the co-founders.
One of the co-founders.
Yes.
Well, that's one in studio.
No problem.
And then we have also joining us the project coordinator of the Consortium and Close the Loop Caribbean, Mr. Sayeed Ali. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning, colleague Hamlin as well. And good morning to your viewing audience. Happy to be here.
Welcome to the program. Mr. Ali, before we get into the depth of the conversation, tell me what the Consortium and Close the Loop Caribbean, what is that? What do they do?
Well, it's Close the Loop Caribbean. So Close the Loop Caribbean is a consortium of organizations who belong to the private and the civil sector. And what we do is these organizations essentially utilize organic waste within their production cycles, or their processes to develop their goods and services. And what we do is we essentially channel streams of waste to them for them to utilize within their production cycles. And within this integrated waste loop approach, which is very collaborative, they also channel streams of bio-waste back into the waste loop so it can be used by other partners as they would.
So, obviously, utilizing waste, making waste useful, which is incredible, actually, and we'll get more into that as we get into the conversation. Mr. Holder, as co-founder, Cube Root Farms Limited, and the basis of it, I can guess exactly what it is, but let me not do such. Please explain to us.
So Cube Root Farms is basically an agricultural tech company. We specialize a lot into innovation, and the main thing is sustainable farming practices. Right? A lot of our methods of farming is organic. We use minerals like azomite. We do indoor farming, incorporate renewables. We have a mint farm producing right now. We produce quite a range of agricultural produce. We also have a store, bell peppers, in Couva, where we sell sustainable food, and we also do sustainable harvesting of the waste products. So what got us into it was we were always striving to get something organic, and that's where we saw that the organic waste was a big factor in the whole cycle, and I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that and how we can make an impact.
Please excuse me. But gentlemen, a conversation of members within government, stakeholders within the agribusiness and agricultural sector, NGOs, CBOs, came together to have a conversation about bio-waste and converting bio-waste into useful byproducts. Hamlyn, why is there a need for that conversation in Trinidad and Tobago? I mean, we're a small island developing state. We have a small population. Why is this so important to TnT?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think there are many factors that demonstrate the importance of it. One is that, well, on a global level, we have climate change, And organic waste contributes heavily to methane production, right, which is one of the focus areas of the COP28 this year that were being discussed. Another big issue is that our level of production of organic waste is increasing year on year. I think as of 2022, we were about 700 plus thousand. We may go to the 800,000 mark tons of organic waste every year. And if you include possibly like paper and cardboard, that'll be 50% of all our waste is actually organic waste. So the question is, that comes from somewhere and it goes to somewhere, right? So we are taking away from the whole carbon cycle and we are putting it into our dumps. And just to give us some numbers to sensitize the audience, we are looking at about 700 plus tons, which is, you know, a 40-foot container, if you could imagine that. Picture 25,000 of those every year.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, 25,000 40-foot containers of bio-waste.
Every year, yeah.
Wow. Sayeed, incredible statistics that we're learning about this morning. But has TnT been forced into this conversation, not only because of the global warming and climate change factor, but also because of our habits and how we are down here in terms of disposing and discarding of waste?
Yes, so I would agree. So there's numerous things that have to be done, both from an institutional level, from an organizational level, and also from a public standpoint, where a certain amount of sensitization has to be done with households for persons to understand, firstly, exactly what happens when this amount of organic waste is sent to landfill, and secondly, why is it important to separate this organic waste from other types of waste, and thirdly, that there are actually applications that you can use this organic waste for that are useful within the economy and within the environment, where they will not have to go towards these landfill and constitute these high waste statistics and contribute to these fires and methane production and that sort of thing. They can be used for beneficial inputs. They can be put back into the economy. They can employ persons. They can increase revenue for the country. And it essentially, at that point, will not be waste. It will essentially be just another input into a production cycle.
So given that this seems to be quite a pressing conversation, following the conversations on January 6th, what mechanisms in terms of solutions were actually discussed amongst those present?
Well, there were a multitude of solutions discussed. Something to note is that there's a large number of organizations within the private sector that are actually already executing some of these strategies within their own spaces and within their own pockets. So conversations and dialogue like these are great to bring these organizations together, so persons know what others are doing and can incorporate and collaborate accordingly. And this can essentially drive the entire industry and the entire space forward.
Mm-hmm. You are, Hamlyn Holder, you and your company, you're players in this industry. You saw a market which I don't think people would even consider venturing into because they're not necessarily aware of it.
Yeah.
And how has that been from establishing Cube Root Farms Limited to now, especially given the timing that we are, COP28 and all those discussions, and what TnT as well as the Caribbean is facing?
Yeah, definitely. It was a lot of awareness and sensitization of the public. I would say that, people are willing, people are open. There are a lot of misnomers, a lot of misconceptions with how to deal with agriculture, what is the correct practices. And again, the key word is sustainability. The organic waste sector, it drew me in because the amount of waste, but also the amount of potential. And that's why I'm trying to, as well, with ICA and SwimCall, come together with the consortium as well, so that we could get some greater awareness, And I love platforms like these where we could get the message across because people, it's something that we don't take into consideration, How much organic waste am I producing every time I carry out my garbage? And I did a study just within my little home, and I realized, whoa, almost 50% of it could actually go back into the soil. And you're hearing certain initiatives like Save Soil and so on out there, and we are getting more and more awareness, but we need to do a lot more. Yeah.
Now, there's a term that you used at the beginning of the conversation, sustainable agricultural practices.
Right.
Please expand on that.
I could talk all day about that.
Go for it.
All right, so there are many different ways, permaculture, so many different methods. But I think if you look at Close the Loop and the whole theory behind it is that things should not come into Trinidad and Tobago so much as a nation and a country, and things should not be leaving, but our ecosystem. You have to think of things in an ecosystem or a cycle, and how could that just sustain itself, right? We saw with COVID and the Ukraine that, we had to depend on wheat from another country. So the question is, when you start to go down to the chemistry of it, the carbons, the nitrogens that is coming into our country, and then when you look at when it leaves the home and goes into the dumps, where does that go after that? That goes into methane, which goes into the atmosphere, and then we have, impacts to the climate. So I would say, it's sustainability is about not just doing something, but looking at the whole from start to the end of, is it the best practice? Are we doing it the right way? Because, we looked at driving and then we bounced down somebody. And then we had to put in limits and speed limits. The oil and gas has carried us to a certain point. And with that oil and gas, we were able to have all this technology and advanced technology as we see here. But it has some consequences. So now it's not just an economic driver. We need to understand what are the other impacts, environmental, our survival is at stake. Those are the things that needs to be considered when you're talking sustainability.
Saeed, if we were to continue for what Hamlyn just mentioned to us, there's a term which you've used. In fact, it's part of the release, and that is the circular economy or the bioeconomy as well. Could you kindly explain to us the circular economy and the bioeconomy, if they are two separate entities?
Yes, well, the circular economy is what Close the Loop Caribbean focuses on. So circular economy is a term that's being used quite often now, but it's pretty simple actually. So the idea is that resources, when they go to the landfill, they are usually very far away from the end of their useful life. One of these resources is actually organic waste. So the idea of a circular economy is that before this, we would have functioned in a linear economy, which constitutes take, make, and waste of resources. Whereas in a circular economy, within the production process, you try to reuse, recycle, upcycle, repair resources, essentially trying to keep it within that loop of production as much as possible in the economy before it's actually sent to waste, so that only the minimal amount as possible is sent to waste. And what we saw with organic waste is that you could actually include organic waste into these loops of production where none of it will have to be sent to the landfill after. So that's what's pretty positive about organic waste when you're looking at it from this standpoint.
But I'm still confused, gentlemen. Help me understand this a bit further in regards to part of this project is focusing on bio-waste and making them into useful byproducts. But what are some of these useful byproducts that you guys are speaking about? Hamlyn, let's start with you.
So again, it's about awareness and letting everybody understand how big impact this can make, right? So when you think about bio-waste, I mean, it's one, of course, it could be recycled and come back. A lot of the plants in the industry right now, one of the main things they produce is fertilizer, right? So you can actually take your old banana skins, pumpkin shavings and so on, and put it back into the soil. And that kind of completes the cycle so that you don't have to spend so much money on fertilizer. Other byproducts that we have seen is also not just in the food, not just in agriculture, but you also have energy. Because when you produce methane, it could also power houses. There are many countries, Grenada, for example, has a biodigesters We have some here as well, and that actually powers kitchens to cook. So we could actually get energy coming out from the methane that is produced. Now, typically, when things rot, the methane goes into the atmosphere, right, through natural chemical process. But when you have it in a biodigester, that methane stays there, gets burnt, and that is used as energy. So there's energy. Then you could also use it to produce food. You have it for building soil health and getting that nice biodiversity subsoil. And of course, the dumps are just being overfilled.
Oh, yes.
Right? So if you could cut on literally 50%, if you consider cardboard and paper, which is by essence carbon, right? Just in very complex structures, that could go back into the earth. In fact, we import so many things, you know, so that goes back into our nature, our ecosystem, and turns into the pure mineral elements that could give plants and feed ourselves. So now we're getting food and energy, and what more you need?
This is a form of recycling that we're speaking about.
Of course. It's a powerful form of recycling, because with the waste, you could feed other things, right? With the waste, as you could see with the mushroom farming, you can use that to also feed the mushrooms, and then you could eat that. So you take the mushrooms, the little scraps goes back into the soil feeds the plant works in a symbiosis with fungi and mushrooms, and that could also be eaten by you again. You are supporting the plant supports you, you support the soil supports the plant, and everything works in a cycle. But we have to make that chain. Right now, it's a sort of one-way street, and we're not going around in a circle. So we are constantly burning chemicals, natural gas, to make fertilizer, to make food, to then dump it in an external landfill. And that is not sustainable by any means.
Well, your example there, the first thing that came to mind is how you just mapped it out. The waste is incredible. The wastage is incredible. But Sayeed, that chain that Hamlyn has mentioned, creating that chain, and this is where closed loop comes in sort of forming that chain and bonding that chain together. Has the efforts been accepted, easily accepted? Has the concerns and also, I suppose, the solutions that go along with such concerns have been widely acknowledged and accepted here in Trinidad and Tobago? Because bear in mind, you're close to the Caribbean. But if we're focusing on TnT right now and TnT's practices, what has that been like?
Well, the dialogue is definitely moving along, and it's moving along in a positive fashion. But of course, there's a lot more work to be done. So where Close the Loop Caribbean is concerned, a lot of our partners have actually been within this space for quite some time. So what we essentially can do is build off of the momentum of some of these larger organizations who have been within this space for some time. So just to give some examples of some of the partners, there's IA Movement, who is an organization, an NGO, which focuses on community-based empowerment, especially where in the environment and social impact is concerned. They actually utilize organic waste to rehabilitate over 30 acres of degraded land through the IWECO project a couple of years ago. And that utilized the organic waste in a heavy way for organic mulching, which created the soil ecosystem, which allowed microorganisms to live in the soil and essentially help create the soil ecosystem that could help reforestation occur. There's multiple other organizations who utilize these organic wastes back into their loops, and essentially, because every process has some form of waste associated with it, the chances are that there is some organization out there, or some company who utilizes this waste within their processes, and it will be a beneficial input for them. For example, Thompson's Garden Materials. So Thompson's Garden Materials last year has actually composted 15,000 tons of organic waste. And the idea through the Close the Loop Caribbean Consortium is to significantly increase this amount, as well as streams that are going to other partners who are using it beneficially there as well. So there is definitely a willingness, because persons are realizing that this is beneficial for their processes, And there's definitely a mutual benefit where this is concerned, and we're happy to help with this process and guide this process along.
I like how you said that people are realizing that there is a benefit to this. But if you were to speak to larger organizations who would consume a lot more and obviously produce a lot more waste, one of their biggest concerns is, I'm not going to deal with this at all because financially, economically, this has no benefit to me. And if we're having a conversation and we're trying to sensitize everyone to this issue, large corporations are going to consider that this is just going to be more time, more resources. It's not bringing back anything to the company. How do you appeal to such?
Well, larger companies who we've actually been in conversation with thus far have been very, very willing to work with us. Again, because there has been an identification as of recent times that this is just generally better for the environment. This is better practices. This is more sustainable practices. This is the direction that our manufacturing and the agriculture is going to move towards. And there has just been an identifying amongst these organizations that this is the direction that they would like to move in, and most of them are happy that there are organizations like Close the Loop who are there to assist and close this gap and bridge this gap and help to guide this process along.
Now, to the bigger questions.
Sure.
Is this expensive for consumers? Yes. I know you're a bit taken aback.
Of course not. In fact, as we get into the economics of it, it's profitable, right? So we have organic products, and one of the main products that is a very good seller is something called worm castings or vermicompost. And that is literally just using worms to eat the organic matter and produce manure. Or you could get worm tea, which is,
worm tea.
Yes, worm tea. Now, these things have very beneficial properties. When you have plants that are suffering from bad fungus and stuff like that, the worm tea will actually cover the surface area of the leaf, and it prevents, it basically covers, it's like good bacteria, like yogurt. Mm-hmm. So you put good probiotics and good bacteria inside your system so that the bad one doesn't take up the real estate. With worm tea, the intestines of the worm has so many beneficial bacteria and fungi that it covers the plant, and it prevents, cercospora and a whole set of other diseases coming and attacking the plant. So it could be used as a pesticide, actually. It repels other pests and insects. And also, once it goes into by the root system, it's now giving it nutrients because it has broken down everything already. So, we have taken that from the store. In the back of the store, we are actually taking all the refuse and stuff like that. We pass by, certain big companies, Rituals and Starbucks. We get the coffee grinds as well. That gives the nitrogen.
Yes.
So we get the carbon from paper, eggshells. If I see flowers, I might pick up a whole bunch of flowers by the poetry around the savannah, put it into the worm farm. And now if you want flower production in your plants, it will break down the potassium and the phosphorus and give it straight to the plant in a form that it knows, because the worm and the plants have evolved in symbiosis so long that they have actually known how to feed each other. So don't take it for granted when you're walking in the park and underneath you there's a whole ecosystem underneath there. So for the consumer, just to bring it back for the economics, you're literally outputting zero. It's net negative, if anything, because you are taking away from things that you would typically throw away and actually converting it into something of value. So it's very economical, and it costs nothing. A worm farm might be about $200, but you're $200 to $300. You get your worms, you get some bins, put it together. I know there are initiatives like the Captain Turner bin that compost as well. So there are many ways, very simple ways, and you could have it very discreetly here, but the amount of matter that you are now converting into a usable, valuable form that could actually grow food and prevent diseases and prevent pesticide. A lot of the food we eat now is, if you eat a cabbage, it's probably soaked in pesticide, trying to avoid organic waste. So be careful, I just said.
No, it's good that you said that. No, I need to watch out. Sayeed, back to you. And it's something that you've spoken about previously. But in regard to what Hamlyn has just mentioned, I know as a little boy growing up, one thing that was taught to me is don't throw away the eggshells or the coffee grounds. You know, throw it in the plant. As a little boy, I didn't understand what that was at all until I got older and older. And it's not even something that was necessarily taught to me in school. It's something that you have to hear from conversations like what we're having this morning. So in terms of the success of such initiatives or practices, it's not just predicated upon commercial or corporate entities. What about community development and community initiatives?
Yes, so to answer this question, I also tie it in a bit with your previous question. A certain level of sensitization and education with the community is definitely needed. There are organizations that I think are situated within these communities who are very well equipped to move that dialogue forward within those communities. And the thing is, from that standpoint, when you have households that are actually separating the waste, it makes it just a bit easier. And this ties back into your previous question of, is this expensive? So quite frankly, the largest cost associated with this is transport. It's transport regardless of what, because in the end of the day, it's taking something from point A to point B. However, we have certain systems that are already set within the country. So there's certain public waste transportation systems and so on, where we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. More or less, if we could adapt these systems to divert waste from landfills and at the same time have a certain level of sensitization with the public where sorting is concerned, we can move into this fashion where the households are sorting their waste from the home, and then the transporters now know where to send what. And it's that much easier, and it's a bit more systemized. And from that, it actually makes sensitization going forward into future generations so much easier, because it will essentially just be something that we do. That's how we throw away waste. That's how we separate things. You know, that's just how we do. So it's something that it has to be holistic and work all at the same time. But dialogues like these are definitely beneficial to driving that forward.
Now, I'll tell you something, what you just mentioned there in terms of households, even from the start, learning to separate their waste or exactly what is something that you see in a lot of first world or developed nations. For example, in England, there's a bin for almost everything. There's a bin for biodegradable waste, for cardboard and paper. From what I understand, there's now bins for cans, and there were bins a while ago for glass bottles. Now there's a separate bin for cans and aluminum now. So that's something that you're seeing in taking place in developed countries. But say, you know, here in TnT, we like to compare ourselves to everyone else. In terms of this, our neighbors across the Caribbean, how is Trinidad and Tobago doing in terms of our progress as compared to other islands in the Caribbean?
Well, each island is obviously, of course, its own unique situation with its own different nuances and so on. So I would say that the best comparison for Trinidad and Tobago today, it was Trinidad and Tobago yesterday. And I would say that with a dialogue like this, we're definitely in a better place today than we were yesterday. And the idea is to just keep moving forward and probably compare us to ourselves, do better today than we were yesterday, and we could move this entire space forward.
Diplomacy at its finest. Now, as you know, as an individual who has established, co-founded a business, has focused on bio-waste, bio-management, sustainable agricultural practices, in terms of policy and in terms of engagement, what more would you like to see being done or being implemented or pushed?
So we are doing a lot. And I think ICA helped us to reach a good point, almost at the end of 2023. So 2024 is looking very promising. What we are trying to do is establish a consortium of some sort or an agency not totally governmental, not totally private sector, not totally non-profit, and coming together with the community to raise awareness. So it will involve a lot of the private sector entities. It will involve, of course, you have to hit the curriculum, the education system, the universities, secondary schools. Just for example, this year we set up some worm farms in a lot of the schools. So in Brazil Secondary School, they actually won their science award through sustainable agricultural methods. And we started worm farming communities. And we want to extend that not just at a community level, we want to extend it to a business. Because everybody has lunch, they have employees, they eat food. Some of them are actually producers of organic waste, right? It might be from a refinery process, maybe making a little cerveza or beer, right? A Carib and so on. And they can take that waste and team up with organizations that are willing to take all of that. If Blue Waters, for example, not just calling, right? Sorry if I didn't mention your company. You know, a lot of coconut shells, that could be taken. The wheat and byproducts, that could be taken as well. But we have to form that. It's a burgeoning, growing economy that starts at some point, and we're hoping 2024 we could kick that off. SwimCall is also leading the effort, and there's a nice study on waste characterization, as you mentioned, segregating waste. And they did a good study on how waste is characterized. And from that, you could get economic inputs. And there was a study also by the University of the West Indies that showed that we can't supply the amount of organic waste needed for even our agriculture. It's so tremendous. But we have the waste. It's just a matter of turning that waste into valuable commodities that could feed other sectors and keep the sustainability within the economy.
I think it's excellent, and I think you've piqued my interest further on worm farms, and something I'd like to actually incorporate in my
you can join the worm farm community.
Yeah, that sounds rather incredible. Sayeed, for the work that you and your organization is doing and has done actually, what more in terms of progression would you like to see being done or being implemented? Best practices, policies, whatever it may be that is necessary.
Well, honestly speaking, we believe the next step to significantly diverting large amounts of what we call yard waste. So yard waste constitutes grass cuttings, tree cuttings, branch cuttings, and so on, is just to touch back on something I mentioned earlier, is the alignment of the current waste disposal practices with this sort of circular economy, where there are already transport systems in place. And the question now is, can we utilize these same transport systems to send these these products elsewhere, to send these materials, elsewhere instead of the landfill? And I think that we can, because the systems are already in place. We just have to align them accordingly, and it shouldn't be impossible to do. It's something that we can do, and it's something that we can move forward with.
Well, Sayeed, as we conclude this conversation, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to leave with the viewing audience?
No, once again, just thank you for having me here. We're very happy to be on this program. Thank you again for Hamlyn for being such a good colleague in this discussion. And yes, we're happy to just move forward with this dialogue and these discussions and the work that we do into the future. And we're excited for what the future holds where biowaste is concerned in Trinidad and Tobago.
Certainly, and thank you very much to you and to your colleagues and to the organization for their efforts. And well, we will need an update in time to come, so you'll be back on the program very soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. Hamlyn Holder of Cube Root Farms Limited. Thank you for joining us this morning. Any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to share with those viewers?
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone to make themselves self-aware, and you know, with the upcoming initiatives, come and be part of it. So, I mean, if you look at the success of things like Arrive Alive and the Hunters Association, Search and Rescue, and so on, these are just individuals that have come out and tried to start something. And similarly, we are trying to build a momentum, get everybody involved, communities, the business, the education system, you know, even hosts of television networks, right? You could all be part of it, you know, and it's low cost. It's not that you need to spend a tremendous amount of money. So I am just imploring you to be aware come 2024, ICA, Swim Call, EMA, we'll be doing a lot of initiatives and collaboration efforts. And you know, if you see a little tent or a little venue on a Sunday or Saturday, come and check us out. Check us out on the social media handles as well. And we look forward to, you know, really tackling this serious issue.
And since he's, you know, tried to push me a little bit, why not push him? You can check out Hubert Farms Limited and Bell Peppers Limited in Couva. In fact, I think I'm going to check them out because I'm always excited by any fancy named store. Anyway, Hamlyn Holder, thank you very much for joining us this morning. All the best to you for the rest of the season and into 2024. Looking forward to further conversations and updates.
No problem, man. I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime.